What's up, guys? Get a lot of questions about certain controls and certain settings in game and in stream. So, quick video just to recap everything so that way we don't have to answer it all the time. General settings, pretty basic. I recommend turning on always show compass and always show fire mode selection. A lot of times you'll be in game and you'll spectate somebody and you'll see them walking upstairs tapping the fire selection button just to check what fire mode they're in. This prevents that. They could just look in the bottom corner of their screen and it'll always be there. Also, the compass just helps with callouts when you're in the pub game and someone says, hey, there's somebody to the west, you know which way west is, and vice versa, you can call them out. If you're in competitive, this doesn't matter so much because you're going to have strategic callouts like, hey, they're on the balcony, or they're in the jail, or they're in the apartments, or whatever the callout sign might be. NVIDIA highlights, recommend turning this off. I find that highlights in most games are a little buggy. It can either lag the game when it records, or it can just prevent crash or cause crashes and errors, not prevent them. And so if you're getting random crashes, turn this off and see if that fixes it. If not, keep it on if it's something you enjoy, you like to look back, or you like to do some web editing or film editing. Go ahead and leave it on, but I like to leave mine off. I can always go back into my stream and pull my videos, so I don't need that on. Keybinds, pretty general keybinds here for the defaults. I have two things. I use a crouch, hold, and toggle. Reason being is I like to slide with my hold button, so that way I can easier slide than trying to move my finger over to the control while holding shift. It just lets me, I don't know, it feels a little bit better as far as ergonomics go. So that's just my personal preference. You may say that it doesn't bother you, so you're just going to leave your crouch however you have it. But that is how I use my crouch. The only other thing that I change here is aim down sights. I do not like to use the aim down sights toggle. I don't hard scope that much, and I would rather be able to come out of scope faster to go to a target that's further away, and it will show you why because of my sensitivity settings. And I think it's just better to be able to have it on hold, so that way you can zoom in, kill somebody, and zoom out and get the whole field of view again, so that way you can acquire targets faster. A lot of competitive players use this hold to aim down sight button, so just something to get used to. Highly recommend doing that. Everything else pretty much the same standard stuff. You can kind of customize this if you want, but I have not changed any of it. And so here's my settings for sensitivity. I have a fairly high look sensitivity. This is so I can snap to targets quickly. You're just basically looking at the center of your screen, snapping to them, and then I have a lower aim down sight sensitivity. This is as soon as I start snapping to them, I'm going to aim down sights, and this is going to slow down my mouse sensitivity so that once I'm there, I can make the fine adjustments to their head, the chest, you know, if they're laying under a bus or if they're like shooting through a crack, I can aim for the crack. Um, so having a lower aim down sight sensitivity just lets me have that fine adjustment. Some people don't like this. I know players who like to have the really snappy mouse movements, and you know, if you're good with that, then have a higher aim down sight sensitivity. Other than that, everything is the same. I don't have different scale sensitivities for my scopes or anything like that. I just leave everything the same. As far as video settings, this is going to be based on your computer system, of course. I have a 4.5 gigahertz processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a GTX 1080. So I'm kind of at the middle to higher end of PC systems. So if you have something lower, I will tell you where you can make some adjustments to improve your performance. VSync off, as always. Field of view, I like mine at 80. This is not too narrow and not too wide. And this seems to be the sweet spot for me. Some people play at about 75 to 70, and if that works for you, then great. I find that's a little bit too narrow. I can't see out of my peripherals as well. I do catch players on the side of my screens quite often, and so 80 just helps with that. Anything too wide and you lose some focus of what's directly in front of you, if you run a narrower field of view on iron sights, you can kind of see a little bit further. You can make out targets better when they're further away. So I like them at 80. My AA is FXAA. This just smooths out the graphics a little bit. Anything a little higher is really hard on the GPU and the CPU, so keep this at FXAA. This will just run smoothly and give you a fairly good picture quality. Texture quality is very high for me. This is the highest setting it'll go to. Once again, GTX 1080 lets me run this at very high. Most of the load goes to the GPU, and it's perfectly capable of handling this load. If you have anything less, you might have to bump it down a little bit, but I recommend running this as high as you possibly can without affecting your performance too much. This will just take load off of your CPU, which is the big bottleneck in this game. And so take some load off of it, run your graphics settings higher on this setting, and it should run a little bit smoother, I think. But you can play around with this. This is the only setting I'd recommend running at high though. Everything else low. I leave my post-processing at medium. I feel like it just cleans up the graphics a little bit. I might play with this a little bit, but for now medium seems to be working. I get decent frame rates, and when I'm not streaming, my frames are over 80, which is fine for me to game at. They don't really dip anything below 60, so it's perfect. When I'm streaming, sometimes I get frames down into the 50s, but that's just because the streaming takes up so much system resources, so nothing I can do about that until I get my second two PC stream set up. Everything else, motion blur off, everything pretty standard. I leave my filtering at 2x. Once again, this just cleans up the graphics a little bit, and everything else standard low. Other than the texture streaming pool, you can mess with this a little bit. This just dedicates some of the GPU RAM to holding textures. So if you have a lower end GPU, turn this down. It'll kind of free up some of your GPU RAM to render textures. I find that I don't have an issue rendering, so leaving it at high seems to be okay so far. The rest is just audio settings. I just turn the music off and I run my master volume at 50, so that way I can leave my system volume at 100% or my desktop volume at 100%. So that's it, guys. See you out there.